Welcome to the Intellectual Anarchy podcast. I'm Patrick Sullivan.
And I'm Catherine Cruz, and I'm just a curious cat.
So, elements, meaning that there's got to be stuff you're doing that's just way cool. That you would do it for free because you just like it. It's just fun. And fun and play are really important and underappreciated. So when you play, you're learning. And I would tell this when our kids are growing up, but surfing. I said, this is applied physics right before your eyes. Right, these waves are coming in. I said, that's the transmission of energy and information. It came from across the planet. We can't even understand it, but we can surf it. And I said, but that's what's going on the planet, and it's right here. And when the wave crashes and when you basically carve into the wall, I said, that's physics. On your feet, in your face. It's as visceral as it gets. And I said, now you're learning science, right? Because there's no confusion. It's like, if you don't get it right, guess what?
You wipe out.
Yeah. And it's a learning opportunity. So I would tell this to some adults that would say, why you take your kids surfing? They're going to be bad kids and, it's a bad influence. And I say, it's not. It's about learning. And I say, when you're out there, not only do you learn respect for the ocean and that environment, but I said, when you really break it down, it's like you can experience science firsthand. And I said, it's so powerful when you do it that way. It's true for a lot of other things too. But I would use that as a real example because that's exactly what it is. It's applied physics right there. And so I would encourage kids, adults, and others to kind of take that approach to understanding these things because it's so much fun, but it's not like you're not learning anything. You really are learning a lot. And when you learn, when you play, you're kind of relaxing a lot of your inhibitions and it frees up your imagination. And so you start thinking of things that you might not otherwise think of, but you think it's a cool idea, it's an interesting thing, something you're not sure if you understand, for example, just the idea that I don't get that. What's up with that? Like, if you're out there and you're waiting for the next wave and you see all these birds coming by, you're going, okay, what's with these birds? Like, they see something. Little things may be very subtle, but you're gaining all this understanding of the world and physics all at one time. And that's because you're playing. And play, by definition, is there's no one making money with it. You're just having fun. There's no other reason to do it.
Yeah, and if you lean into something, you go faster or you back off.
Right.
You just feel it.
Exactly. And because it's such a visceral experience, you'll never forget it. I mean, you internalize it. And so what I've done over the years is for example, as an engineer and a licensed engineer, I always do the fluids. Why? It's just intuitive. I can feel it. And and that's just me. Now, a friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, Ao Yi, was a brilliant structural engineer. And we were at lunch one time, and he said, I started out trying to be a double E, but it was hard work, but when it comes to the structures, it's like right in front of my eyes. Everything is so easy. He just feels it. And he's a member of the National Academy of Engineering and really world-renowned. A funny story on that one was I was in D.C. in the area in a bar below the DARPA office, and talking to a friend of mine, and he says, you must know there's this guy in Hawaii, and he said he's the world's expert on concrete. And I say, what do you mean? He says, yeah, there's this guy. And I said, I know everybody. I'm not sure I know who this is. He says, this guy, you ever heard of Yi? I said, you mean Mr. Yi? Because I used to serve with his sons. I was a classmate of some of his sons. I used to use his board. And I didn't know he was this guy, right? We became friends after, but he said, yeah, he's one of the leading thinkers on the planet. But I remember sitting down with Al at lunch. He said, yeah, it's just, for him, it's just all intuitive. He said, I can see the answer, so then I got to go back and write it. I understand that because that's what I do on a lot of things. When it comes to structures and structural engineering, that's how we did it. And that's what I mean. You know, you feel it because you're around it, you do things with it, you internalize it, but it's not work. And I think he worked until he was close to 100.
Wow.
Because for him, it was like, this is just fun, right? And I kind of tell people to find the fun in what they do and the passion and how they feel about it, because life's too short. And when they do that too, they can also be very good at it. So that's why in the chapter, How Emotions Drive Innovation, I wanted to give some daylight to that, because there's people like that, but they sometimes will put that aside, like they can't have that. But in fact, I encourage people to do that.
Right. It's not just an 8 to 5 job. You work and you go home and then you have fun. It's like,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I do that here. I mean, I've told people I don't really plan to retire. I'm trying to get better control of my time, but I really enjoy a lot of what I do because it's just fun. And so not everything is fun, but clearly there's parts of it that are just fun.
Well, I guess when you glom onto an idea and you get excited about it, then you're just passionate. You're just going to run until you get the answer.
Well, and it's interesting because we're not only running to get the answer, but it starts out usually where we have this idea, but then we got to start asking these hard questions. We don't always get the right answer with every question, but we learn to pivot, because then we say, oh, wow, I didn't understand that. Now I understand it better because I've got the data. And so even if it's not exactly what you thought, you may discover something even more interesting. But you've got to be open to that, objective process of interrogating your thoughts, talking to people, experimentation, collecting data. I'm a big advocate of testing and trying things, firing things up, blowing things up, because it's like, yeah, it worked or it didn't work, as opposed to let's all just talk theory all day. We can debate that till the cows come home, but look, let's fire this puppy up and see what happens.
Build something.
Exactly. And I encourage our guys to do that, and you learn so much, but it's not always what you were expecting. It could be different. That's not always a bad thing. So it's not about your ego, it's really about your curiosity. And if you're having fun, I think part of having fun is you're learning, you're experimenting, you're understanding how the world works and what it's doing. And it's just really cool, even if it's different than you thought. And some people get really defensive. It's like, no, I'm like the world's expert. In my view, I like to learn something new. It's like, shit, I got that wrong. This is how it works. Wow, okay, for me, that's a success. And I try to have everybody around, here feel the same way. Everybody's a little different, but from my perspective, that's what makes it all fun.
Sometimes I like to just stop, put it down, not think about it for a little, but I really am still thinking about it.
Yep.
And then you come back to something.
Absolutely.
And look at it a different way. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I tell people here the same kind of thing. Go take a break, go surf, go do something, because clear your head. And when you do that, you relax your thinking. Your brain's still kind of working, this happens to me all the time too, where I'll put a problem down, go to sleep, wake up, and the answer is right in front of me. And I didn't plan it. It just happens. But it's that kind of relaxing your thinking, take a break, do something even totally different, right? Just stop it and step back, because sometimes the answer is like right there, but you're so fixated on the other thing that you can't get it. And you just got to stop, step back, clear your head. And for me, that's fun too. To be willing to try something. The courage to be wrong, the courage to be right. Right? You may try something and find out you didn't get it right, but learn something that would be better. But it takes a certain amount of courage to do that. And when people are insecure, they become defensive. And we want people to be, not to feel like if they get it wrong, that they're going to get beat up. But that, it's kind of this, this will sound totally wacky, but you know how like comedy teams do improv? Mm-hmm. Right? The way they talk about yes and, but you're building on these ideas. Some ideas are better than others. And people are kind of putting more wacky ideas out there and kind of building on other people's ideas. That's how it works. But people have to feel safe that they can have a wacky idea. Maybe a dumb idea, maybe a better idea. But the space to do that is really important. And sometimes, for example, when we're working on things that are really difficult, I may throw out an idea that's just absurd. And it creates space for others to have a better idea. Because they can say, well, that's nuts, but what about this? As opposed to, I just took all that fear off the table. Because now I look like, a bozo for thinking that, but they've got a better idea. And that actually busts through some of these things. As opposed to feeling like I can't say anything because nobody wants to look stupid.
Right. So it's like, well, I'm going to use chicken feathers to make a new fabric. That kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'll start with the stupid thing, clear the air, and then you guys do the smart stuff. Because that's how real innovation happens. It's people need to feel comfortable, to put ideas out there, to be willing to try things, to debate things, right? We try to have respectful debate. Some people really like that. Like they want to challenge some of your thinking, but that's okay because we're trying to get to a good answer. We're not just trying to defend our turf. And that's one of the big challenges in a lot of academia, right? Because a lot of these guys are certified smart faculty or something, and they just kind of dig in and they don't want to do anything different when in fact, maybe they should try something else. Maybe they need to move on to another subject. Maybe they got some of their ideas sideways or wrong, or maybe the world changed. All kinds of things can happen. So here, I try to create the space for people to have those thoughts without the retribution of feeling stupid or inadequate or anything else. And we find that ideas come from all over. So you may have experts, non-experts, people trained in, from law or logistics who have good ideas. And we're trying to create the space where that's okay.
So I'm probably still stuck on the chicken feathers thing, but how did that come about?
Well, no, that's a really good question. So we have a young lady, got her PhD in aerospace engineering on advanced avionics, who looked at the efficiency of birds and what makes birds really efficient in what they do. And it turns out feathers are really optimized for the way birds like to fly. So through Darwinian evolution, feathers got this thing worked out where, as the modern Western world is, we overlook that now. Again, Leonardo da Vinci and this history, people tried to do that, but nobody really looked at it like a disciplined scientist to look at, so what's up with the feather? And so that was part of her dissertation. And so she was asked by a group on supply chains for the military. And so their big thing was, well, let's try hemp, because that's like, whoa, okay. So if we don't have cotton, maybe we can use hemp. And I think it's a great idea. Some people don't want to do hemp because people might smoke it or wear it or whatever. But there's a lot of ridiculous misinformation out there. But that's a really good idea. But then this one is like, yeah, there's this really interesting material. Nobody uses it, but birds figured this out a long time ago, and you can use it for all kinds of cool stuff. And so I think that was the early thinking, speaking for her. And I know I can only do so much of that. But then when they did it, when they tried stuff, and they threw in their proposal, and I think it got funded because it was like, this is so wacky, like what on earth? So people were curious. It turns out it's a really strong material, and it can be put into a fiber so that you can make fabrics. And it's totally overlooked. So it was like, whoa. But I think it started with this kind of interesting question about, so what's up with birds? Like, how come birds are so efficient? Like birds of prey, hummingbirds, they've all got their own little spot through Darwinian evolution that enables them to be really, really good at the thing they do, but yet they all use feathers. So how's that? That they use all feathers in all different ways. Turns out, because the Western world, modern man, doesn't get it. But now they're starting to tease out all the secrets from these birds. It sounds kind of wacky, but the question she was looking at was this advanced surfaces for controlling aircraft, drones, and everything else, because we only do generally what we know and do already versus let's throw out the playbook, start from fresh and see what happens.
And what does nature do? So go back to nature and...
Exactly. Yeah, and the last time that happened was probably like 1,000 years before. So, it was a long time ago before anybody even experimented with it.
Yeah, so the answer's right in front of us.
Exactly. And see, what's interesting is that it's there, I think, for a lot of things. We just don't see it. And that's why it's such it's a fun area, right? This field of what's called biomimetics. It's like trying to understand how nature, through massive experimentation over millions of years, has optimized so many things. And they're real efficient. They work really well. And we just can't come close to it. With all of our engineering and all of our, science, it's because we don't know everything. It's because we got a lot to learn. And that learning can inform all kinds of things. And so not just, like in this case, it's a fabric, but you take some of the same principles, that may be our survival in outer space. There's just so many ways to use it, because once you start unlocking the secrets of what nature has spent millions of years putting together, but it turns out hardly anybody ever asked him. No one asked nature how that works. People study it, but to tease that out of it takes a different skill set and a mindset.
Right, then it's the possibilities.
Exactly. And so I think that's why that's such a fun topic as well. Yeah. But the fabric was just kind of nuts in the beginning, and it turned out it's not such a crazy idea after all. But it was I think the way it came back from the sponsor was like, what? Like, are you kidding? But it was the only thing, everybody proposed exactly the same thing, except this was like totally different. But that goes to the comment of the courage question, right? Have enough confidence to be different, even if you get rejected. Because if you're trying to be like everybody else in a field, they're going to only fund so many of those things. This is the only one that's like this. But there's a certain amount of courage involved, because most people want it, if I'm like everybody else, nobody can say I'm not a smart person, when in fact, the real innovation comes from people that are willing to think differently, who have the discipline and the science, knowledge, and background. Right. There's a lot of education there. But take all of that and then try something totally new, that takes courage.
Yeah, be brave.
Exactly, which is part of it. So these attributes we talk about, how emotion drives innovation, courage is one of them. Because people that don't have courage to try something new will never get outside of what they already do or what the standard is. And there's really interesting examples of, I think I review in the book some of the things that Apple did by going wireless earbuds. Like, right now it's hard to imagine wired earbuds. But back then it was like, well, you can't do that. Or all these kinds of innovations, which were so different because it's always been done one way. And then somebody says, well, why we do that?
Right.
And there's really interesting examples like that in the world. But it's almost like people got to get to the point where, like you don't care if people say you're crazy.
Well, you often hear, you got to build a better mousetrap, right? You got to build a better hearing aid.
Yes.
So, yeah, why can't we?
Yeah. And so what's really fascinating now is that there's so much change in technology, in manufacturing, that there's so much we can do. And so I think we're entering a phase of history where we can do so much more disruptive innovation that we haven't seen in decades. And that is a very exciting time. But see, the things that are going to drive that are people that are, I think, maybe people that have a hobby, people that do things outside of just one thing, people that, if they don't surf, maybe they rock climb, maybe they ski, maybe they scuba dive, maybe they do things that are different, that have nothing to do with work, but just are sure fun. The fun that comes from that informs their thinking, informs innovation in ways that we don't even understand, but it creates that space for trying things, experimentation, observing what's going on, like what's with these whales out there? Like, how come they're doing this thing? I don't know. No one ever asked that question. And then all of a sudden, you're learning something new, and that may turn into an entirely new way to manage, I don't know, CO2.
Yeah, but until you're open to that. Yeah.
That's right. And to be open to that, you need to have that confidence and courage. And to do that, I think, what really helps is the right environment. And that's one of the things we work on here, is the right environment where people can have different ideas. Be willing to debate the ideas, but we don't tell them they can't have a thought or can't have an idea. They can't say, I just want to do X, if they're not willing to talk about it or defend it or debate it. So we would encourage that, but they can't just say, because I said so. There's got to be a rationale about why, and there'll be this conversation that debates it, that comes up with like, okay, what if we try this thing? I was just telling we had a group of interns, and they were saying, when you're doing this, like, how do you pick from all the things involved when you're trying to do something really disruptive? As I said, you look for that one thing that like breaks through, that says, that was really cool. Like, what just happened? I just did this thing. I'm not even sure if I understand it, but all these other assumptions, I question them all. That one remarkable thing. And that seed opens up these vistas of thinking.
I think that's where you get the adrenaline rush. It's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's exactly like that. It's like an adrenaline rush for people with these technical fields. They just get excited. They'll work relentlessly after something because they're just excited and they're driven by it. And they're willing to take those chances because they know that they kind of almost got it and they're moving it in the right direction. That's where emotion has a lot to do with how things happen.
Yeah, you catch the wave and you just ride it in.
Exactly. And surfing is a really good metaphor because I've told this to people over and over. I said, wiping out on a really big wave, yeah, it's painful and it can be scary. But when you get it right, it's so much fun. And I said, you never forget those rides. That's why you paddle out again.
Right. It's exhilarating.
It's exhilarating. And I said, that's what people learn here. And if people learn to do that, they learn to take those chances, they'll learn to paddle in. And they may get hammered, but they may get back up and go out and try it again because they know if they get it right, they're going to have a hell of a ride.